Hey everybody, this is Mr. Moffin coming back at you with another APUSH video. Once again, taking a look at topic 7.8, 1920s, cultural and political controversies. Previously, we talked about the impact of art and literature in 1920s America and how 1920s American life was affecting women, families, and education. Today, we're going to be shifting more towards kind of, straight line politics today. And when we talk about the 1920s, this is the return of the Republican Party to power. And I don't mean like Republican Party of Teddy Roosevelt or William Howard Taft. I'm talking more straight line conservative republicanism. To some degree, kind of in between the truly laissez-faire Republicans of like McKinley and Ben Harrison, and the much more progressive Republicans like Roosevelt and Taft. And, after 20 years of progressivism, we're going to see America kind of going through a sense of progressive exhaustion. And, what we tend to see sometimes in America politically is that, if we tend to kind of move in one direction for a while, maybe a generation or so, we kind of have a desire to go the other way, to kind of equalize that out. And we had about 20 years now of, presidents and the government running in a more, liberal direction. And now, after the war's over, there's going to be a desire to move back in a more traditional conservative direction. And Warren G. Harding, who is going to be running for president in 1920, is going to be capitalizing on that. Harding is going to be running on a platform known as a return to normalcy. Kind of saying that, hey, the progressives have done too many changes, too much, has been going on that we maybe don't recognize in America anymore. Business is way too regulated. There's too much involvement of the federal government in our everyday lives. And we need to get back to a time where the government knew its role. It was defined. It was limited. And so Harding's going to be winning pretty easily in this race. And when Harding, comes to power, he is going to be promoting a very, what we would call pro-business, very business-friendly administration. Now, it's not going to be, pre-laissez-faire. So, in other words, they're not undoing the antitrust acts, like, the Clayton Antitrust Act. They're not getting rid of, the 16th Amendment, with the income tax. They're not getting rid of the Interstate Commerce Commission. They're not getting rid of any of those things. But they are, for example, going to reduce taxes, especially on business owners. These are guys that believe in what we would call today trickle-down economics. You help the business owner keep taxes low on them. The money they save, they can then reinvest in their companies, and that expands the entire economy for everybody. We also are going to see, even though these laws that are going to be progressive in nature, regulating the economy, still on the books, minimally regulated. So it's going to be very obvious. If you are a business owner, you are excited about this new Harding administration. And if you look at the folks that are in his cabinet, you can see, these are solid conservatives. These are people that believe in small government, limited governments, a lot of business freedom. You can see right here, former Republican candidate for president in 1916, Charles Evans Hughes as Secretary of State. You've got, wealthy financier Andrew Mellon as the Secretary of the Treasury. You got Herbert Hoover over here as the Secretary of Commerce. So, you've got this group that is really defining itself on limited government, limited responsibilities for the government, much more pro-business friendly attitude coming into the 1920s. And in many respects, you kind of see, some of what you kind of see as in the conservative Republican Party today in terms of views, in terms of limited government, friendly business policies, stuff like that. We also see something interesting happen with Harding. Harding is going to be appointing William Howard Taft, former President William Howard Taft, to become Chief Justice of the U.S. Supreme Court. Now, this is interesting because Taft becomes the only former president in American history to go on to the Supreme Court. which in many respects is fitting for Taft, because if you know his history, you know his story, Taft never really had a strong urge to become president in the first place. It was more what his family and wife, wanted for him. And he struggled. He put on tremendous amounts of weight. He, topped out well over 350 pounds, the getting stuck in the bathtub thing. But he always wanted to be on the Supreme Court. And now this is going to happen in the 1920s. He loses a lot of weight. And in many respects, Taft kind of brings the Supreme Court into the 20th century, even overseeing the construction of the Supreme Court's first ever standalone building. The Supreme Court didn't even have its own government office until the 1920s, if you can believe that. Now, when we're talking about Harding in terms of economics, it's not just about lower taxes. It's not just about reducing regulations on the economy. It's also a very tried and true attitude, conservative Republican attitude on tariffs. We're going to see the Fordney-McCumber Act passed, which will raise tariffs on imported goods. Now, note, the tariff is becoming more diminished as a significant political issue and as a source of revenue since the 16th Amendment's income tax has been applied. But still, that change doesn't happen overnight, and this is still going to be significant. But unfortunately for Harding, he's not so much remembered for his, pro-business policies, for example, but mostly remembered for the numerous scandals that are associated with his administration. The most famous of which is the Teapot Dome scandal. Now, the Teapot Dome scandal involved the Secretary of the Interior at the time taking bribes from oil companies to be able to use protected lands out west. Teapot Dome is actually in Wyoming. And, land that was supposed to be protected, not developed, not used, we're going to be seeing these secretly and illegally leased out. But the Teapot Dome scandal is just going to be the tip of the iceberg in terms of the unscrupulous and unsavory antics of many of Harding's, underlings. Harding is, in many respects, going to suffer some of the same problems as Ulysses S. Grant. Nice guys. We don't see a whole lot of personal scandals with them, at least, personal criminal activity. But they also are, very poor at picking advisors and people to kind of, carry out the duties of the executive branch. We know scandals certainly define the Grant administration, and it's going to happen with Harding. And it's going to be especially noticeable with Harding because many of these guys that did end up getting top bureaucratic jobs were buddies of Harding back in his days when he was an Ohio politician. In fact, these cronies of his that he brings to D.C., we're going to see newspaper writers describe them as the quote-unquote Ohio gang. And many of them are going to be getting in trouble. Probably the epitome of this is going to be, when we see the Attorney General get convicted of taking bribes regarding prohibition. Basically what was happening was that, as we said before, you could get licenses to be able to sell medicinal alcohol during prohibition for those that had a doctor's note. Well, to get that license, you had to get approval from the government, right? And the guy that had, a big say on that was the Attorney General. And, taking kickbacks to be able to decide who gets these licenses to be able to sell medicinal alcohol, that's illegal. You can't be taking bribes, can't be doing that. So the Attorney General resigns in disgrace. So we are seeing, a lot of these scandals starting to kind of, pop up. Now, here's the thing with Harding. Most of these scandals don't really come to light until tragedy happens for Harding personally. While on a trip to San Francisco in 1923, Harding's going to die of a heart attack. And, really it's after his death that most of these scandals start to come to be realized and stain his presidency. Now, when Harding, dies and leaves it vacant, we see Vice President Calvin Coolidge, pictured right here in this photograph, become the next president of the United States. Now, what's interesting about Coolidge is that he is very much in line with Harding in terms of his policies, in terms of limited government, pro-business policies, all that kind of stuff. but you could not have asked for a more different personality. Harding was a gregarious, backslapping kind of guy, loved to press the flesh, shake the hands, you know what I mean, have his buddies over for poker parties, all that kind of stuff. Calvin Coolidge had the personality of your countertop. He was nicknamed as Silent Cal, that, you know, he didn't really show hardly any emotion. He hardly ever talked. Not much in terms of personality, for sure. Certainly not much in the charisma department. But at a time where you didn't need television or internet to win elections, it seemed to work out for him, because at the end of the day, Calvin Coolidge was very clear in his values of what he wanted from the American government. He wanted a pro-business government. He's famous for saying, you know, the business of America is business. The idea being is that the most important domestic policies for the federal government is to make sure that American businesses are as profitable as possible. And that's going to start with Harding and really ramp up with Coolidge. We start to see the stock market going way up. We see more people getting employed, more people making more money. This is something that we hadn't seen before in American history. So we're starting to see prosperity rise, and a lot of it is being associated with these conservative Republican economic values, and Coolidge in particular. And that brings then Coolidge into the election of 1924, where Coolidge is going to be riding on his economic success to this point. One of his campaign slogans is "Keep cool with Coolidge." You know, he had like an electric fan as part of the platform, saying like, "Hey, folks can actually afford electric fans." Pretty modern, cool stuff. He'll be going up against John Davis, who is going to be more of a kind of a straight line traditional Democrat coming from the South, not certainly a progressive. And because of that lack of progressive values in Davis, we're going to see the return, the reemergence of Theodore Roosevelt's Progressive Party, even though Theodore Roosevelt's been dead now for 5 years. And the new champion of the progressives will be Wisconsin's Robert Fighting Bob La Follette. But in this election, it's not going to be particularly close. You know, most people tend to vote with their pocketbooks, and if the economy's doing well and you're the president, you tend to get rewarded with that. And you can see that happening here in the results. Now, you still see a lot of the old parties, support going back to the Civil War. You know, the South's still loyal to the Democratic Party. But other than that, and other than Bob La Follette winning his own home state, you can see that the broad swath of America is very pleased with the Republicans, and Coolidge gets elected to a term in his own right. And when we talk about Coolidge for the remainder of his presidency, he's going to be renowned for being unwilling to expand the size of the federal government. He's going to be unwilling to spend a lot of money. He is going to be getting a reputation that he will pinch every nickel. He will not, as a matter of principle, allow the federal government to run deficits during his presidency. And for those that are very much concerned about limited government and making sure the government stays within its means, that's going to be a redeeming quality. Others, though, are going to view Coolidge as, well, chintzy and almost Scrooge-like in terms of his unwillingness to use the finances of the federal government to try to help more people actively. Coolidge was certainly a believer in, self-accountability in terms of one's own success. And as long as the economy was going great, Coolidge is going to be able to be very popular with that going on. So Coolidge is going to be a very popular president throughout the 1920s, and riding a sky-high economy, an ever-expanding stock market. In many respects, this is going to be a very good time for the Republican Party. It won't last forever, though. We will end it here for today. Next time, we'll take a look at the third Republican president of the 1920s. That's going to be Herbert Hoover. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.